Think?
Well, I think we are, aren't we, for the next 3.5 years while he's in office?
People talk about his rock-solid voter base, but many people presumably will be scandalised by... There are people who still don't like these phrases being used. They will be repulsed by all this, surely.
Possibly. I mean, America's very conservative, isn't it? But, I mean, I do wonder, you know, obviously there's a lot of very firm Trump supporters, but of course these are people that have probably voted Republican forever. They're not going to change because of the mooch, even if they are.
But they've got quite conservative values. No, not just because of the mooch, that's right. But they've got quite conservative values, many of them.
I've said it before, but I'll say it again. The problem with the states is that they speak English, and so we presume that we understand the states. But they are as foreign as Azerbaijan is to us, actually. If you get into backwoods Florida or backwoods Kansas or whatever, and I've been to a few of these places, it is an entirely alien and different world. And the evangelical Christian world, which backs Trump wholeheartedly, is even more remote than Azerbaijan. If you want to understand Trump at the moment, I think there's only one thing really on his mind, and the rest is distraction, which is that Mueller is looking into his business background and his family and is just haunting him deliciously. And he is terrified of that because he's got a lot to hide, transparently. I don't think necessarily they colluded. I don't think they were even clever enough to collude with the Russians. I think the Russians played a game with them during the election and set them up in all sorts of ways. But there is shady stuff in Trump's relationship in the past with Russia, and Mueller is silently padding towards it. And Trump wakes up every morning with icy sweat in his armpits, and it's a joy to hear it drip.
We will see if your prognosis is correct. A source close to Bannon says neither he nor Donald Trump care, so Scaramucci may well survive. I want to ask you about what's happening in Australian schools. You just mentioned evangelical Christians. The Australian newspaper reports that Christmas cards and any talk of Jesus are to be discouraged in the playgrounds in Queensland. This is under a new directive from the Education Department. It's an attempt to crack down on junior evangelists who may be imposing their beliefs on non-Christians. The department says children spreading symbols of Christianity to other students doesn't fit in with the inclusive environment of the state's multi-ethnic schools. Can you engineer human environments and interactions like this, like they're trying to do? What do you think?
Well, I think you can try to, and I can understand that a lot of schools are agnostic now in terms of not talking about, you know, Jesus and what have you at Christmas, but to actually stop kids in the playground giving out Christmas cards and things like that, I guess they can try and enforce it, but I would have thought they're pushing the proverbial uphill. You
think it's doomed to fail?
Yeah.
Joe?
I taught at a couple of ostensibly Christian schools many years ago, and by far the most effective way of inoculating children against religion is to try and induce it in them. No one came out of any of these schools with a Christian faith that they didn't go in with in the first place. But it sounds like these are the kids of evangelists.
Yeah, I'm assume so.
Right, well, not much you can do about those poor buggers.
Interesting that they think they can. Joe Bennett, thank you very much on the panel. Always nice to have you back.
My pleasure, thank you.
And Victoria Stewart, same applies to you, of course. Thanks for coming back and come again.
My pleasure too.
Have a lovely weekend, everybody. That's the panel done for a week. We're back on Monday. And Checkpoint with John Campbell now.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, residents of some homes in Wellington are questioning if people should be living there at all after a major slip on Devon Street. Lots of slips elsewhere, road closures, evacuations. We'll have the latest from Wellington. The Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, says Dunedin Hospital does have enough ICU beds, which is different from what the DHB itself was saying earlier in the week. And why has it taken 3 days for the Southern DHB to speak with the next of kin of a man who died waiting for heart surgery? Open warfare inside Donald Trump's inner circle. An American man who owns a popular Wellington cafe is criticising poor advice by a National Party MP, and Christchurch City Councillor Raf Manji takes on Jerry Brownlee. Stay with us, we'll be back after the news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon, ko Katrina Batanaho. A ninth death in Auckland may be linked to synthetic cannabis. The police say a woman who died last night may have been smoking the drug. Sharon Brett Kelly reports.
The 31-year-old woman was found dead at a Kelston property in West Auckland. The police believe she may have been smoking synthetic cannabis a short time before her death, but there may have been other contributing factors. The matter has been referred to the coroner, who will ultimately determine the cause of death. 8 deaths have already been linked to the psychoactive substances in Auckland in just over a month. Yesterday, officers arrested 2 people in St Luke's with up to 3 kilograms worth of synthetic cannabis. The police say they have been searching properties every day and seizing the drug. This is Sharon Brett Kelly.
There have been at least 460 landslips in Wellington this winter, and 2 more last night have left houses in danger of falling. Repeated wild weather drenching already waterlogged ground is getting the blame for the winter toll. One house above a slip in Evans Bay has been evacuated after earth and trees crumbled onto the road below last night, leaving the deck of the home unsupported above the road. And a home in narrow winding Devon Street in the Aro Valley is under threat from a slip. Nearby resident Adam Stewart thinks it could put people like him at risk too.
We actually are in a steep ditch down there, so if our bank went, we'd just be buried under that probably, but I doubt it would happen. Ours is quite built up with like stairs and all this sort of stuff, so the bank's probably held together fairly well, I would say.
An Aro Valley resident, Adam Stewart. The people evacuated from the 2 homes look like staying out all weekend at least. The Trump administration's newly appointed communications director has launched an expletive-filled attack against senior White House officials. Anthony Scaramucci has vowed to crack down on White House leaks and is threatening to go on a firing spree until the situation is resolved. He's also attacked Donald Trump's Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus, and Chief Strategist, Steve Bannon. The BBC's Laura Bicker reports.
Mr Scaramucci has indirectly accused his colleague, the White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus, of leaking information about the administration. In an extraordinary phone call with a reporter from New Yorker magazine, Mr Scaramucci described Mr Priebus as a paranoid schizophrenic. He also took personal aim at Mr Trump's chief strategist, Steve Bannon. Mr Scaramucci has been in the West Wing for just a week, and he appears to have spent more time launching personal attacks than pushing the president's policies. He may also be forcing the Chief of Staff and a key Republican establishment figure out of the door.
A judge says the jury deciding the fate of a man who shot and killed his 2-year-old child must put aside the anger, sympathy or emotion they will have inevitably felt. The High Court jury has retired to decide whether Gustav Otto Sampt is guilty of the manslaughter of Amakura Daniel Sampt in Auckland last year. The Crown says he pointed the gun at his child and pulled the trigger, but the defence says the gun was faulty and went off accidentally. Justice Venning told the jury they must feel sympathy for Amakura Daniel Sampt or anger at her loss, or sympathy for Mr Sampt, who continues to be deeply upset by the incident.
When you are considering the charge against the defendant, you are acting as judges. A judge can never allow a feeling of prejudice against or sympathy for anyone associated with a case to influence his or her decision in any way, and nor can you.
Justice Venning. The owner of a South Canterbury farm hit by the devastating cattle disease Mycoplasma bovis says all 150 infected cows will have to be put down. Ard van Leeuwen says he's already killed about a dozen cows suffering from the potentially fatal disease, which causes mastitis, pneumonia, abortions and lameness.
Very busy, very stressful, not only for us, but also the people involved on the farm, of course, more so. We're getting through things and things are under control, but there's a lot to go through and a lot of procedures to be put in place.
Mr van Leeuwen is hoping the outbreak has been contained. He says so far there's no sign of the disease at any of his other farms. It's 5:04. The sport, and the Silver Ferns shooter Maria Tutaye says she needs to take a break from netball if she's going to make it to next year's Commonwealth Games and Netball World Cup in 2019. Tutaye has re-signed with the Northern Mystics and Netball New Zealand for another 2 years and has had a sabbatical written into her contract so she can prepare herself for the busy international schedule. The 107 Test veteran says she plans on taking her break during next year's ANZ Premiership. The wetter the better is the motto for the Crusaders ahead of their Super Rugby semi-final against the Chiefs in Christchurch tomorrow night. It's 9 years since the competition's most successful franchise, the Crusaders, last won the title. Coach Scott Robinson's Midas touch in just his first year in charge has seen the Crusaders win all but one of their games. He was particularly pleased with how they waded to a 17-0 quarter-final win against the Highlanders on a waterlogged AMI stadium and would be just as happy for it to be as wet again tomorrow night.
Wetter the better. Yeah, hell yeah. I look at our field and we're from the deep south and it's raining and you embrace it and enjoy it. And look, technically we were good last week, so and we've done a lot of homework on how we can be better.
Crusaders coach Scott Robinson. And Hamilton BMX rider Jessie Smith has won her under-16 age group title at the World Championships in South Carolina. Smith also won last year's under-15 title. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life visits an avocado orchard just off the Bay of Plenty coast. OK, it's dedicating our sonic tonic to illness on Nights Totally Sick after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Taumaranui and Taupō, including Bay of Plenty. Scattered showers, a few with hail, easing this evening, becoming fine tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, showers possibly heavy about the Wairoa district, easing tomorrow. Snow lowering to 400 metres this evening. Taranaki and Taihape to Wellington, also Wairarapa. Showers with snow lowering to 300 metres in the south for a time, becoming isolated tomorrow. Nelson Buller, Westland and Fiordland, fine apart from a few showers in Fiordland tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine but showers north of Ashburton, falling as snow to around 300 metres, gradually easing and clearing tomorrow. Southland, fine spells and isolated showers, gradually clearing tomorrow morning. And the Chatham Islands, rain, possibly thundery, easing to showers tomorrow afternoon. Southerly gales developing this afternoon. It is 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks so much, Katrina. Coming up on the programme tonight, Dunedin's ICU beds, are there enough? Well, it depends on who you're talking to. Raf Manji and Jerry Brownlee fighting it out in Christchurch, cleaning up Auckland's stormwater and much more. But we begin tonight in Wellington, where residents of houses in the suburb of Te Aroha are questioning whether people should be living there at all after a major slip triggered road closures and evacuations. Some residents had just moments to grab essentials before fleeing homes left teetering on the edge. In the suburbs of both Te Aroha and Evans Bay, the residents of two homes in those suburbs will be unable to return until council reports are completed next week. The Wellington City Council says there have been 460 slips in the city so far this year, of which 300 have been repaired. Lots still works in progress. In a moment, we'll speak with Wellington Civil Defence Controller Bruce Pepperell, but first this report from Jacob McSweeney.
Christopher Ramos Flores is a PhD student at Victoria University and stands at his front door looking at the contractors cleaning up the slip on Devon Street, about 20 metres away. A white sewage pipe hangs out of the hillside, spewing effluent onto the pile of rubble. Christopher Ramos Flores' neighbours at the big white house above the slip were evacuated last night. Mr. Ramos Flores says he noticed bits of rubble coming down during the week, and he wasn't surprised after heavy rain last night that a big heap has come down.
So it was like that for a week maybe, and then suddenly last night I went out, and when I came back it was all completely down, and it's kind of scary to be here after you see that, because as you can see here, my house has a slope. I feel like all of the houses around here are in similar conditions with the weather and, you know, the fear of maybe an earthquake or something, and raining all the time. It makes you wonder if it's a good idea to be living here.
Christopher Ramos Flores has already had slips close in on the side of his house and points out a new wooden retaining wall about 2 metres in height, keeping a small amount of rubble out. And if the slip had fallen in a direction towards his house, he and his wife would have been cut off.
The house is connected to the street with a tiny bridge, so we actually don't have another way to go up here except for the fire escape. So yeah, if the slip had happened this way into the bridge, we wouldn't have the bridge and we wouldn't be able to access our home.
Christopher Ramos Flores says his flat is cold and doesn't get much light, and he says now it's dangerous and it could be time to move on.
It's been kind of hard with the weather, and now with this thing happening here, and I actually have the feeling that the house is getting sloppier lately. I don't know if it's actually...
It's starting to slope.
I feel like the other day I was walking and I just had the sensation that I think it's more pronounced now.
Tony Kennedy lives further down Devon Street, close to where it meets Outdoor Street. He says this slip is the biggest he's seen on the slalom street.
There's lots of little slips it's quite prone, this whole street's prone to slips, but they're usually pretty small. That one's pretty big by Devon Street standards. That deck is pretty precariously placed relative to the slip.
Another Devon Street resident who came to check out the damage was Adam Stewart, a Victoria University student.
We actually are in a steep ditch down there, so if our bank went, we'd just be buried under that probably, but I doubt it would happen. Ours is quite built up with like stairs and all this sort of stuff, so the bank's probably held together fairly well, I would say, and it's been there for those houses in the bottom of like early 20th century houses.
Over in Evans Bay, a house on Maida Vale Street was evacuated this morning. There were 2 flats in the large house overlooking Wellington Harbour, and both sets of tenants had to quickly pack bags and get out as council staff were concerned about the state of the slope before engineers checked it. Georgia Murray and Hannah Masters both work at the bakery Pandoro and were bewildered when I arrived at their door to tell them their house was on the edge of a slip.
When we moved in, we asked the landlord about earthquakes, but we didn't ask about slips. We've lived there for 2 weeks today, and we're supposed to have our third flatmate moving in Sunday.
Yeah, he's a bit concerned now.
Yeah, I feel like we live on a boat, but I don't want to actually be a boat.
Another slip on the Niall Gorge Road restricted peak morning traffic to 1 lane, but that was cleared by 9 o'clock. There were a number of smaller ones on the sides of roads in Johnsonville, Evans Bay and Aroa Valley. I te whanganui atara mō te otaka o te ahi ko Jacob McSweeney tēnei.
Standing by on the phone to join us, Wellington Civil Defence Controller Bruce Pepperell. Are you there, Bruce?
Yes, John. How are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, probably better than you. You must be exhausted. How many slips have you had?
Well, I understand we've had about 400 this winter, but, you know, the last month we've had quite a bit of rainfall, and that's what happens when you have houses on the side of a slope.
Yes, but the houses have been on the side of the slope for as long as there have been houses in Wellington, right? It just seems particularly bad this winter. What's driving it? Is it rainfall? Is there a sense of possibility that things were a bit loosened by the earthquake? Do you know what's behind all of this?
Oh, look, we've had houses on side of slopes for the last 150 years, so if you go right across a long period of time like that, you're bound to get a few slips. Look, the situation here in Wellington is we had a very dry June, but it's certainly been a lot rainier in July than what we're used to. I think we've had 160% of our normal July rainfall.
Right.
And so with a little bit of water and gravity, unfortunately, on occasions this is what happens. The other thing's worth looking at is that the majority of the times when you get these slips, it's in the more mature areas. So, you know, I wonder whether it's a factor of the way slopes are cut compared to the way they're done now.
Okay, so what you're saying is that some of the zoning back in the day and some of the, and you know, I remember these homes so well from when I was growing up in Wellington, some of them just teeter precariously above nothing, so maybe they wouldn't be allowed to be built in quite such circumstances now?
Well, it's probably a factor. I'm not an engineer, but it's worth noting that the majority of these slips occurred in quite established areas. And you've only got to have a look at some of the houses. Some of them are cantilevered out over cliffs. Not how I'd like to live, but look, they're very nice houses. But if they're on a slope and you get rain, then sometimes you've got to expect these sorts of things.
Do you have the resources you need to make clean-ups, assessments, get things, get the debris off the roads as quickly as possible, and to get people back into their homes as quickly as possible? Do you need more staff?
No, look, I think the council are onto it. I mean, I said there was 400 slips this year, but I mean that goes from quite large slips down to a couple of barrow loads of silt. In this instance, there's 2 sets of families evacuated. They won't be allowed back in their properties until geotechnical engineers have made their assessment. So we're erring on the side of safety. But yeah, look, I think the Wellington City Council got under control pretty well.
Bruce Pepperell, who is in charge of civil defence in Wellington, thanks so much for joining us live. If you are affected by a slip in Wellington, or you have opinions on the increasing number of slips, 400 reported so far this winter, we would love to hear from you. Text us 2101 or email us checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We're going to stay in the capital, just drift a little bit north, up the harbour a bit. An American man who owns a popular Wellington cafe says poor advice by National MP Chris Bishop may have cost him and his family the right to stay in New Zealand. Steve Jensen, who owns Java Point Cafe in Lower Hutt, was forced to leave New Zealand with his wife and 3 teenage children 2 Fridays ago after his application for residency was rejected for failing to meet GST targets. Now, as we'll hear, he didn't appeal. Mr Jensen says his local List MP Chris Bishop offered hope by saying he'd get the Associate Minister of Immigration Scott Simpson involved. We called Scott Simpson's office on Monday to ask if he'd made a final decision about the Jensens. We were told he had, but that decision would be conveyed to the Jensens by Mr Bishop, the National Party List MP based in the Hutt Valley. During the week we contacted Mr Jensen to see if he'd heard from Mr Bishop. When they hadn't heard by Wednesday, we called Mr Bishop to ask why he hadn't told them. He didn't return our calls, so we called Steve Jensen today to see if he'd heard from Chris Bishop yet.
He called me about 12, a little after midnight one night, and told me that he had heard back from the minister and that the decision was negative, that the minister was not going to intervene. And there was a little moment of silence, and I told him that I just didn't understand why, and he said basically the minister has just made a decision to not intervene, and Chris will forward me the letter. So he did, and so then I stayed awake the rest of the night with my wife, and we mulled it over and talked, and I don't know. That's how we found out. It was a little unnerving. So
now I've got a copy of the letter to Chris Bishop from Scott Simpson, the Associate Minister of Immigration. And the third paragraph says to me, I note that the family's resident application was declined in March 2017, but they did not avail themselves of the opportunity to make an appeal to the Immigration and Protection Tribunal in relation to the declined decision. Why didn't you make an appeal?
That's a great question. We paid a lot of money. We went to 3 different immigration advisors, legal counsel, who all advised us, they'd been down the process, that based on the business immigration advisor, or the person who rejected us, she had every right to reject us on the grounds that she did. And therefore, there was little to zero benefit of going to a tribunal. They didn't have any grounds to overturn it. And in fact, we did call Chris, and the day that was our final day of appeal, we had 42 business days, or 42 calendar days, I think it was, to appeal from the original date, and just said, you're 100% sure, right, Chris? We're not supposed to appeal. And he goes, no, I wouldn't appeal. So we said, great. We'll go to the other route.
Forgive me for seeking clarification here, but Chris Bishop, who describes himself as the National List MP based in the Hutt Valley, and that's a statement of fact, he is a National List MP, and he's based in the Hutt Valley. So he was being a kind of advocate on your behalf, was he?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We met with Chris a few times, told him our situation. Chris informed us before we got the decision back, when we preliminary got the letter that said, basically in November of 2016, that said, we doubt that you're going to fulfill all the requirements. And she listed about 12 different items that we hadn't met, in her opinion, on. We, at that point, went to Chris and said, this is a huge letter. This is a big thing. We'll address these. And Chris said, well, you need to let it take the course that it needs to take. I'm not going to jump in or intervene right now. And that's what he told us. And so we wrote the letters, our attorney and I, and we addressed every item. And we felt that of the, say, 12 items there were, 11 of them, we met every criteria. There was one that we didn't meet, and that was we didn't raise enough GST. We didn't do the gross sales that we said we would do based on our business plan that was prepared for us by our immigration advisor 4 years ago. We didn't meet that. We got close. We hit a little over 75%, but we didn't hit the full 100% target, and we couldn't argue that. That's why they rejected us. Standalone reason, she said.
And when they rejected you on those grounds, you could have appealed. But did Chris Bishop advise you not to appeal?
He said, yes, he did say that he did not believe that it would be beneficial to appeal.
And did he say to you that he would talk to the Associate Minister of Immigration on your behalf?
He did a number of times. He said he would go, and bat for us and, present to the minister. Originally, he said he would talk to Michael Woodhouse out of Otago, because that's who needs to make the decision. And then that changed about probably a week before we left New Zealand, where he said Michael Woodhouse doesn't make that decision. Scott Simpson will now make that decision. He's the associate. But yes, Chris did say that.
That's Steve Jensen talking to us earlier. We haven't heard back from National MP Chris Bishop. We've made a few calls and approaches to his office. He hasn't returned any of them. Meanwhile, the Jensen family really have no alternative now but to abandon their lives in Wellington Lower Hutt, sell up the cafe and their share in the building and start again anew in America. It does look like their chances of becoming New Zealanders have formally and fully gone. Coming up to 22 minutes past 5, a retired Northland police officer says the man who shot and killed 2 women in Whangarei would have found it easy to buy firearms without a licence. Gavin Benny, who was the constable at Tikurangi for 30 years, says there are plenty of illegal firearms around and the police have no way of knowing what's in their gun racks. He says he came across the shooter's family many years ago, living in remote bush country, and he recalls thinking the family was unusual. Gavin Benny says although the law requires firearms owners to be licensed as fit and proper persons, he says Quinn Patterson would have found it easy to buy a gun privately without producing a licence. And he told our Northland reporter Lois Williams he's not surprised he had guns the police knew nothing about, because the police have not had to keep a firearms register since the law changed back in the 1980s.
It's quite easy to get guns, whether a member of the family's got a firearms licence and has guns, or friends, or quite often we used to go to jobs and there'd be guns at a house where nobody's got a firearms licence and they'd borrow them from friends. There's also the stolen guns that are out there that are for sale, and there's always a black market for those. And the day that they stopped registering the guns was a bad day, so you lost track of where these things could be, and so no one's got an idea. You could buy a gun if you went licensed off somebody, and nobody would even know.
How did the system used to work, and when did it change?
Oh, it changed a long time ago. Every gun was registered. The gun owners were registered as well, but they kept a record of what guns you had, so that if we found a gun somewhere, we could pretty much trace most of them where they'd come from. But they stopped that years ago for whatever reason, and so now it's just the gun owners that are registered, not the guns. There's been a couple of exercises done where people have gone and bought guns without producing their gun licence. You're supposed to ask for the gun licence if you're selling one, but do people do that? Probably not a lot of the time.
What do you know about this guy? I mean, you were the policeman up there for how long? 30 years? Up that way?
Yeah, I know the family that used to live. They used to live way up the back of in the bush area there, and I had a couple of dealings with them, and nothing criminal. A long time ago, probably 15, 20 years ago. So I knew the family, but didn't really know any of them personally.
Were you aware that Quinn Patterson had a conviction for stabbing a policeman?
No, that was news to me. That's the first I've heard.
What do you think we should do about this gun system, Gavin? What are your thoughts?
I think the gun lobbies have been for a long time to register the guns again. Whether that they'll go through that, I don't know. It's more people, more money, and I don't think they can be bothered with that. But I mean that was the ideal situation. So yeah.
And it was changed. Why?
I don't know. Simplify things, probably make things easier to record, so that somebody thought it was a good idea to register the gun owner, and the guns would and it works great if everybody follows the rules. But when you don't follow the rules, it creates guns out there and that nobody knows are there.
So the police will have a record of people as being gun owners, but they won't know what they've got in their arsenal.
No, they'll have no idea most of the time what guns they've got there.
That's our Northern reporter Lois Williams talking to Gavin Benny. It is 25 minutes exactly past 5. Open warfare has erupted inside President Donald Trump's inner circle as his new communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, attacks senior White House colleagues with obscene comments and not-so-veiled threats. It's just the latest self-inflicted crisis for the Trump administration, which is still stumbling under the weight of the Russian inquiry, the failure to pass an alternative healthcare bill, and a president who uses Twitter as a policy megaphone to voters often without talking to his own officials first. In an expletive-laden rant to a New Yorker magazine reporter, Mr. Scaramucci blasted White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, describing him as a paranoid schizophrenic. He used a couple of other words that unfortunately we can't say on national radio. And Trump's chief strategist, Steve Bannon, is a man attempting to improve his own reputation on the back of Donald Trump. What he said about Steve Bannon, you couldn't say on many radio stations at all. Jeff Zeleny from CNN reports.
A new wave of drama spilling over at the White House. Less than a week on the job, new communications director Anthony Scaramucci locked in a bitter and remarkably public feud with Chief of Staff Reince Priebus.
If you want to talk about the Chief of Staff, we have had odds, we have had differences. When I said we were brothers from the podium, that's because we're rough on each other. Some brothers are like Cain and Abel. Other brothers can fight with each other and then get along.
The divisions laid bare during an interview on CNN's New Day, where Scaramucci suggested the president's chief of staff might be the source of leaks from the White House.
If Reince wants to explain that he's not a leaker, let him do that. But let me tell you something about myself. I am a straight shooter, and I'll go right to the heart of the matter.
Priebus, seen during an event in the East Room today, did not respond, and President Trump did not weigh in, even as Priebus allies like Speaker Paul Ryan came to his defense.
Reince is a very close friend of mine. Reince is doing a fantastic job at the White House, and I believe he has the president's confidence. So if those two gentlemen have differences, my advice would be to sit down and settle your differences.
Tonight, Priebus' standing in the West Wing is uncertain. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders did not say whether the president had confidence in his chief of staff.
We all serve at the pleasure of the president, and if he gets to a place where that isn't the case, he'll let you know.
On Twitter Wednesday night, Scaramucci picked a fight with Priebus, who had tried to block his hiring last week. Scaramucci suggested Priebus leaked his personal financial disclosure, a form that's actually public. He tweeted, "In light of the leak of my financial disclosure info, which is a felony, I will be contacting the FBI and the Justice Department." He tagged Priebus before ultimately deleting it. Sanders downplayed the divisions inside the White House, even suggesting the infighting was a good thing.
This is a White House that has a lot of different perspectives because the president hires the very best people. They're not always going to agree. We all come and have a chance to voice those ideas, voice those perspectives, and have a lot of healthy competition. And with that competition, you usually get the best results.
But that's not how many Republicans on Capitol Hill see it, including one of the party's newest senators, John Kennedy of Louisiana.
You have all these aides that work for the president, and they want daddy to love them best. And so they fight over turf, and they try to hurt each other. It looks to me like this is, in this White House, it's out of control.
The latest clash comes after the president has spent a week expressing disappointment with his own Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, whose standing also remains unclear. He talked about the criticism today.
Well, it's kind of hurtful, but the President of the United States is a strong leader.
Republican senators have been rushing to Sessions' aid, warning the president against removing his Attorney General or Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who's leading the Russia investigation.
If Jeff Sessions is fired, there will be holy hell to pay. Any effort to go after Mueller could be the beginning of the end of the Trump presidency.
So many Republicans weighing in, saying that all the drama here at the White House is simply overtaking the president's agenda. They are urging him to get back to business here. Unclear if that will happen. Again, White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, he's unsure of where he stands, so everyone who works for him also in the same situation. The president silent on this today, and for the first day in nearly a week, not weighing in on Jeff Sessions. He is saying he will stay in his job as long as the president would like him to. That, of course, is the big question. What does the president think of any of these staff appointments?
That's CNN's Jeff Zeleny with a suitable for work version of what has been going on. The New Yorker article is available online. It's coming up to 5:30. You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Coming up on the program, a charitable organisation plans to build 50 affordable homes and sell them for $320,000. The Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, says Dunedin Hospital does have enough ICU beds. We've been looking at that story at length this week. And Raf Manji takes on Jerry Brownlee in the Christchurch electorate that Jerry Brownlee holds by a very big majority indeed. Don't forget, you can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, you can email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, and you can watch us on Facebook, Sky TV and Freeview Channel 50. Thank you for being with us. Katrina Batten is seated. She has the headlines in hand, and away she goes.
The police say a woman who died in West Auckland last night may have been smoking synthetic cannabis. They say the 31-year-old Kelston woman may be the 9th person to have died in Auckland this month after smoking the potent drug. Wellington hillsides have suffered at least 460 slips this winter, and 2 more last night have left houses in danger of falling. Repeated wild weather drenching already waterlogged ground is getting the blame for the winter toll. Meanwhile, Wellington Civil Defence Controller Bruce Pepperell has told Checkpoint most of the slips have occurred in older suburbs where sections have been carved out more steeply than allowed under modern building practices. The jury deciding the fate of an Auckland man who shot and killed his 2-year-old daughter have asked the judge to help with a matter of law as they continue to deliberate. Gustav Otto Samft is on trial in the High Court for the manslaughter of Amakura Daniel Samft last year. The owner of a South Canterbury farm hit by the devastating cattle disease Mycoplasma bovis says the 150 cows affected so far all have to be killed. Ard van Leeuwen says he's already put down a dozen cows affected by the potentially fatal disease, which causes mastitis, pneumonia, abortions and lameness. A charitable organisation has revealed plans to buy about 20 Housing New Zealand properties in New Plymouth and build more than 50 new affordable homes in their place. The Bishop's Action Foundation wants to redevelop 3 hectares in Marfell, a suburb where dozens of state homes have been demolished and others left to rot. The Health Minister says there are enough intensive care beds for patients in the South Island despite complaints about Dunedin Hospital. Earlier this week, RNZ News reported patient care had been delayed due to the lack of beds, and one family said their father died after his appointment was delayed 4 times. But Jonathan Coleman says Dunedin Hospital has a plan to use its high dependency unit beds to supplement the intensive care unit. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Thank you so much, Katrina, which is, 27 minutes away. Lots of feedback coming in on the Jensens not getting residency, which we revealed about, 20 minutes ago. Yet Mr Teal gets his citizenship given to him because he's rich with powerful mates in the club. I've been to this cafe that's in the Hutt Valley, the Jensen family business, a good business, very pleasant man, not right. And how can someone meet 11.75 items but miss out on getting residency after 4 years, yet some dude in the country for just 12 days gets citizenship? Ask Kelly. Lots of feedback, all of it very much in favour of the Jensens having been allowed to stay. They are not being allowed to stay. Let's turn to business news now with Giles Beckford, our business editor. Giles, welcome in from Wellington on a Friday night. Real controversy about Business Journalism Awards today.
Good evening to you, John. Yes, so usually we try to keep journalists out of the story. We write the story, tell the stories, but not be the story. But in this case, it revolves around the EY Business Journalism Awards. That's Ernst & Young, the accounting business services firm. It sponsors these awards. And an independent judge in those awards resigned after an article that had been put in for consideration was withdrawn at the behest of the sponsors. Now, the article was actually by an NBR journalist, Karen Shearer, and it was about Fuji Xerox and the alleged accounting irregularities. Now, this is a big story which has cost the Japanese-based company more than $500 million in losses. It's led to several heads rolling at the very top levels of that company in Japan. And there is a serious fraud investigation into the activities of the New Zealand operation as a result. Now, this article detailed, or the entry detailed all the goings on, and it was obviously a high quality. The reason it seems to have been dropped is because EY was the auditor of Fuji Xerox in New Zealand. Now, there's been no adequate explanation as to why the entry was withdrawn at the behest of the sponsors, but so be it. That's led to, I shudder to use the word boycott, but Stuff has pulled its entries, the New Zealand Herald has pulled its entries, and I can say that RNZ has pulled its entries as well. And in the same way that we would not accept somebody ringing us up saying you should not run that story or don't do that story or soft pedal on that story, then you have to have some integrity about the awards that you enter and hope that that is followed through. We cannot accept that there should be censorship in any form in that way. One hopes that there will be an adequate and satisfactory resolution, but for the time being at least, I'm afraid it will be a pretty quiet night, I would think, at the EY Business Awards.
Yeah, and rightly so. Giles, what are we looking out for next week on the economic front?
Well, I thought we'd better just pitch forward a little bit. We've got a couple of big numbers coming out. We have second quarter unemployment numbers. We're expecting a steady unemployment rate of about 4.9%. We're creating probably around 15 to 20,000 jobs in that 3-month period. But because we have that strong immigration impulse, that means the size of the labour force is growing, and that keeps the lid on the unemployment rate, and also it keeps a lid on wages. So wages numbers, which come out at the same time, they'll be around the rate of inflation, 1.5%. More numbers on the real estate or the state of the property market from QV. Don't be surprised to see more evidence that in some parts of the country prices are actually falling. Perhaps not Chicken Licken style, but certainly all those lending restrictions and the tight market, they're really starting to bite into house prices.
Thanks, Giles. What happened on the markets at the end of the week?
Our top 50 index took a bit of a spanking today, nearly 1% lower, 72 points down at 7639. And the New Zealand dollar, which yesterday was kicking around 75.5 cents, it's taken a bit of a tumble. It's down at 74.7 US cents and 93.8 Australian. And that's business for another week, John.
It's been great having you with us, Giles Beckford, our business editor. Have a fantastic weekend. Breaking news. Just to hand with the time at 23 to 6, a jury has found a man who shot his 2-year-old daughter guilty of manslaughter. Gustav Otto Svant has been on trial at the High Court in Auckland for the manslaughter of his daughter Amakura at their family home in Mangere on June the 2nd last year. The 26-year-old said he'd meant to throw the gun away, but instead it went off in his hands accidentally while he tried to look it over and light a cigarette. I think we're going to talk to our reporter Rowan Quinn, who was in court. This verdict just in, guilty of manslaughter. We have been covering this at length this week. A very strong case made against Sant by the Crown. We will go to our reporter Rowan Quinn the moment she has left the court. The verdict just back. The Health Minister has been in Dunedin today, where he reassured people there are enough ICU beds at the city's hospital. Checkpoint has been reporting on a series of postponements and cancellations to scheduled operations at Dunedin Hospital, not because the surgeons weren't available, but because there were insufficient ICU beds to care for patients after surgery. On Tuesday, the DHB admitted on Checkpoint there had been a problem, but said extra beds were being added and would be in place by this time next year. But today the Health Minister was more confident about the hospital's immediate ability to meet demand.
The hospital here is able to provide the ICU beds that are required. Jonathan
Coleman being unequivocal. The hospital can provide the ICU beds that are required. Full stop. But on Tuesday, the DHB's CEO, Chris Fleming, had been equally unequivocal, although seemingly with a somewhat different response.
I believe that patients' care has been delayed as a consequence of ICU capacity.
You simply don't have enough ICU beds, do you?
Currently, we do not have enough ICU beds, absolutely.
So, 4 days apart, the DHB had said they don't have enough beds and the Minister had said they do. Interpretation is one thing, the flesh and blood reality of an operation being cancelled is another. On Tuesday, Checkpoint spoke to 3 Dunedin families who'd experienced cancellations. 2 had explicitly been told the issue wasn't surgeon availability or theatre availability, but a shortage of ICU beds for post-operative care.
He has been postponed 7 times.
That's Bridget Telfer talking about her dad, Merv. 7 postponements, including twice after he was admitted to hospital.
Yep.
And there was Kelly's 13-year-old daughter, Amber.
Amber
Amber's got a lot of things wrong with her. She's actually got microcephaly, scoliosis, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, developmental delay, and she has asthma.
Amber had been admitted and prepped for surgery. Family members had taken annual leave to be there. The surgeons were good to go, but no ICU bed. And then there was Owen Glover, 68 years old, a Dunedin man who'd gone to Dunedin Hospital where there is an acclaimed heart team, but got sent to Canterbury instead and then delayed and delayed. We spoke to his daughter, Donna.
They just kept sending letters saying, unfortunately, your surgery has been, delayed or put off or whatever. It will now be happening on whatever date, But yeah, 4 times it was cancelled.
And the first appointment was February that was cancelled?
Yeah, and then March, and then April, and then July.
And then he died in August?
And then he died at the beginning of August, and they had said that he would definitely be in towards the end of August for the surgery, but of course, obviously, we didn't get that far.
Did Owen Glover die as a result of his surgery being delayed? Could surgery have saved him? Our Dunedin reporter asked the Minister that today.
Yeah, so look, that is always concerning. I've raised that issue with the Chief Medical Officer here today, that specific case. And look, we can't talk about details that would break patient confidentiality.
That was the Minister today. We also tried to get answers about Owen Glover on Tuesday and Wednesday, direct from the DHB. The family want answers too. Has the DHB spoken to them?
I have, and I've made contact with the next of kin we have listed, one of his family members.
That's Dr. Nigel Miller on Checkpoint on Wednesday night. He told us, made contact with a family member of Owen Glover who died in the period after a series of heart operations were cancelled.
And I've made contact with the next of kin we have listed.
So he'd made contact with the family, and that, he said, precluded him from talking to us about the chronology of events around Owen Glover. But, in brief, did he die waiting?
I think my primary responsibility is to speak to the family.
Nigel Miller on Wednesday.
Question number 11, Dr. David Clark.
As we were talking to the DHB, Labour's health spokesperson, also a Dunedin MP, was asking the Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, about Owen Glover and other patients.
Like Amber Gibbs, Alan Sutton cancelled 3 times, Merv Telfer cancelled 7 times, and Owen Glover, who didn't make it to surgery and passed away in his home after 4 postponed appointments.
The Honourable Dr. Jonathan Coleman.
Well, look, I'm not familiar with those individuals, but of course it is important that surgeries are performed in a timely manner.
So the Minister was unable to talk to specific cases as well. But how were the specifics going? Today we phoned Owen Glover's daughter, Donna, to see how things were progressing with the DHB. Have you heard from the Southern DHB?
No, I have not.
So on our program, they said they were in the process of talking to you about what happened to your father after his surgery was delayed. Is that happening?
No, nothing has happened as yet. I haven't heard from anybody.
Would there be anyone else in your family who might qualify as next of kin for your dad who has heard from the Southern DHB?
There shouldn't be anybody else. No, I'm his next of kin. Obviously, I handled, all his funeral arrangements and payment of lawyers and, probates and everything like that when he died. So I'm the one who obviously should be dealing with anything like that.
We were confused, so our producer Bridget Burke emailed the DHB. On Thursday, they replied, and I quote, "Dr. Miller has spoken to Mr. Glover's next of kin." No name. We wanted to know who. Who had they spoken to? We emailed the DHB again. Who have you spoken to? We explicitly asked. They failed to give us a name. But an hour later, our executive producer, Pip Keane, received a Facebook message from Donna, Owen's daughter, and I called her back. Have you heard from the Southern DHB since we last spoke?
Yeah, I just flicked Pip a wee message before. They have, Nigel Miller has phoned me. He is teeing up a meeting possibly Friday next week. Yeah.
So you hadn't heard from him, and then we made some calls to say, hey, who are you dealing with? And then you heard from him.
Yeah.
Well, that's good that you're hearing from him.
Yeah.
So now the meeting is taking place. What Donna wants to know is why the delays? Why send a Dunedin patient to Canterbury? And if you're sending him away for surgery, why then cancel the surgery?
The fact that Dad was 68, I just don't understand why he couldn't have just had the treatment that he needed. If he was 85 or something, I would have totally understood that there could be, the whole risk factor, everything. And I'm just really sad that he didn't, wasn't given treatment that he needed. I mean, he still would have been alive and able to hang out with the grandchildren, and what if he'd had, the surgery that he was meant to have. So I'm just, some explanations are certainly high on my agenda right now.
And you are going to meet with the Southern DHB a week today?
Yes.
Well, that's the start of understanding what happened, right?
Yes, it's a beginning, that's right, absolutely.
It's Owen Glover's daughter, Donna. Obviously, we will keep an eye on what happens there. Were the delays? There were 4 of them material in Owen Glover dying of heart disease whilst he was waiting for his surgery. 14 minutes to 6. A charitable organisation is hoping to buy about 20 derelict Housing New Zealand properties in New Plymouth and build more than 50 affordable homes in their place. The Bishop's Action Foundation wants to redevelop 3 hectares of the Marfell suburb where dozens of state houses have been removed and others left to rot. But not everyone is convinced by the plan. Our Taranaki reporter, Robin Martin, has more.
In 2008, 28 Housing New Zealand properties were demolished in Marfell, and in 2012, 20 families were forced out to make way for a redevelopment which never happened. Last year, those buildings left standing were vandalised and stripped of anything of worth. Now the Bishop's Action Foundation, an offshoot of the Anglican Church, wants to build 56 2 to 3 bedroom homes for people with household incomes of between $70,000 and $90,000. The new homes will be sold for about $320,000. The foundation's CEO, Simon Cayley, says research it commissioned found that the housing crisis in Taranaki is about affordability rather than availability.
Over the last 10 years, we found that 40-year-olds, there's been a 40% increase in the number of 40-year-olds renting instead of owning. We also found out that there'd been over an 80% increase in the number of people paying $350 a week or more in rent. And we found out that there are over 1,000 families paying more than 50% of their household income on housing, which is unsustainable.
The foundation set up registered charity Catalyst Housing to help grow the affordable housing market in Taranaki. Mr. Cayley says Catalyst has been talking to Housing New Zealand for several months now about its ideas for Marfell.
We've been looking and we think that the site in Marfell could take around 56 new family homes. And we're not talking high density here, we're not talking kind of 2, 3, 4 stories, we're talking 3-bed family homes put on that site. But as I say, it's a negotiation at the moment.
Mr. Cayley says there is no social housing component in the current proposal, but a rent-to-buy option could be included. Community Housing Action Taranaki trustee Mary Allen says it welcomes the plan, but not without reservations.
Well, I think it's fantastic that there are going to be good quality houses. The affordable name tag, I'm not so sure on. It might be affordable for some people, but the people who will never get onto the property ladder will always be in that, where are the affordable rentals?
Ms Allen says many people the Emergency Housing Trust deals with can't save enough for a deposit.
I would like to see some social housing in here that people can afford to rent, maybe rent to buy, but I'm talking about people who are, they might be on benefits that are less than $20,000 a year, some of them. They've got so little to go on, they just can't make ends meet.
At the Marfell Community Cafe, volunteer barista Jason Monsal reckoned there should be a social housing component in the plan.
It's land that has been used for social housing, and we're encountering housing shortages in the country and stuff. Yeah, I'd like to see the government taking responsibility rather than passing it off onto a private organisation and stepping up to the mark and saying, hey, we'll house our people.
Daniel Pui, who rents in the area with his partner and 2 children, believes the development could give the neighbourhood a boost.
It would be good to have a few more houses around. Other than that, there's a big grass patch here, there's doing nothing, no park on it. It'd be good for the kids. This fella over here, he got a lot of kids. Fella over there, they got heaps of kids. There's a lot of kids around this neighbourhood, so it'd be nice if heaps more people could come down here and, you know, start living.
Housing New Zealand says it has 965 properties in New Plymouth, including 139 in Marfell. And although 50 are vacant, it says it is well placed to meet the demand for social housing in the area. It says in the year to June 30th, it has housed 125 families in the city from the Ministry of Social Development administered Social Housing Register. Catalyst Housing is due to meet with Housing New Zealand next month when it hopes to nail down a deal. In New Plymouth for Checkpoint, ko Robin Martin Tēnei.
Robin Martin is our Taranaki reporter. He does a fantastic job out of the region. Just the breaking news, we're just going to repeat it. Auckland man Gustav Otto Svant has been found guilty of the manslaughter of his 2-year-old daughter, Amakura. What was not in dispute is that he shot her at very close range. It was the circumstances the jury had to determine, and he has just been found guilty of manslaughter. Our reporter Rowan Quinn is at the court. She will join us after the 6 o'clock news. In a David versus Goliath battle, a Christchurch City councillor is taking on Nationals Jerry Brownlee in one of the country's bluest electorates. Mr Brownlee has held the seat of Ilam in Christchurch since it was formed 21 years ago and was nearly 12,000 votes ahead of his nearest rival in the last election. So it's safe on paper, but high-profile councillor Raf Manji, who once worked alongside John Key as a merchant banker in the UK, is undeterred, saying voters are ready for a change and he is the man to deliver it for the electorate and for Christchurch. Conan Young reports.
Second-term councillor Raf Manji has gained a reputation as a smooth political operator, often seen alongside the Mayor Leanne Dalzell at major announcements concerning the city's finances. Having spent 10 years as an investment banker in London, Mr Manji moved to Christchurch and became involved in some of the social enterprises that sprang up following the 2011 earthquakes, including the Student Volunteer Army and the Ministry of Awesome. Now he's standing as an independent MP in Ilam. He believes the government has taken its eye off the ball in Christchurch, and what's needed now is an MP not aligned to any political party to speak up for the city.
The city now is half-baked, and the job is only half done. We've been drifting along for the last 6 months, and that's why I strongly believe we need new leadership, new direction, and a new destination.
Raf Manji believes the election result could be close, putting an independent MP with a single seat in a strong position to negotiate a better deal for Christchurch as either a coalition partner or by supporting the government on confidence in supply. Among his demands would be a $1 billion investment fund for Christchurch. Almost half of this would be spent on building new housing in the central city that people would have the option of owning.
We don't have time to wait around for developers to decide whether it's a good time to build or not. We, the government, will build these homes, and we will work with builders, developers, architects and designers to create vibrant neighbourhoods.
Money would also be spent on an indoor cycling velodrome and a new stadium for the city, allowing it to bid for the Commonwealth Games in 2026.
We're building everything we need already. The Metro Sports, Napunawai Athletics, an indoor velodrome, world-class triathlon track through the red zone. We've got all the kit. That's usually the biggest expense. Let's use it. This will be the icing on the cake, a lofty goal to give us something to really focus on.
Raf Manji says while Ilam voters will most likely want to give their party vote to National, they may want to consider making him their electorate MP. And for those worried that a vote for him may be a vote for changing the government, here's this answer.
If I get into an opportunity for a coalition discussion or confidence and supply discussion, in terms of who I go with, there'll be 3 things I'll consider. One is, will they support the deal that I want for Christchurch? 2, what have the people of Ireland said in their party vote? And 3, what's going to be a stable government?
While he doesn't have the backing of a party, Raf Manji does have some influential supporters in the shape of Rich Lister and former National Minister Philip Burden, and the founder of the Student Volunteer Army and National Party member Sam Johnson. The man he wants to unseat, Jerry Brownlee, was not available to be interviewed. He's in Indonesia for a meeting on combating foreign terrorist fighters and cross-border terrorism. In Ototahi for Checkpoint, ko Conan Young tēnei.
So, what do voters in Ilam think? Well, Conan went and asked them.
We're just asking people who they're thinking of voting for at the next election.
National.
Right.
Yes.
And will Jerry Brownlee be getting your vote again?
Well, I think yes, but in the council elections, is it? Or Rafe Manji is going to stand, so I'm thinking about him. Yes, yes.
What is it you like about Rafe Manji?
Oh, he's straight from the shoulder, and he's got some good ideas. Yeah. I think we perhaps need a change.
And so a big call, I guess. I mean, Jerry Brownlee is pretty popular here, isn't he?
Oh yes, he's done quite a good job, but I think it's time for a change.
Is there anything in particular you like the look of when it comes to Rafe Manji?
Yes, I just like his manner, and he's younger, and he's got progressive ideas, I think.
I'm a National Party person, so I'll certainly be voting for Jerry Brownlee again, as I always do, because strangely enough, as I went past, I had a shop in Fennelton and I knew Jerry quite well, so yeah, no, I'll be voting for him.
And have you had a chance to have a look at what Rafe Manji's proposing to do, what he's standing on?
Just listen to it, it's a lot of rubbish. It's a waste of time. Yeah, I've listened to it.
I'm voting Labor. Yeah, no, so it won't be Jerry Brownlee probably.
I'm not voting for anybody.
Yeah.
I'm not voting.
Any particular reason?
No, I'm just don't really care. I'm too young to even worry about it.
And so, have you heard of Rafe Manji?
No, actually no, I haven't.
He's a city councillor. He's going to stand in the Ilam electorate. But
oh, okay.
Yeah,
no.
He's an independent.
Yeah, okay. I'll Google it and have a look.
Are you a national voter though?
I'm one of those floaters, to be quite honest. No, I think Brownlee's had his days here, there and everywhere. But National have had a fair innings, and it's time that we had a change. But we don't want to be out of the frying pan into the fire, because that's what could happen.
That's our excellent reporter Conor Young in Ireland. We've got Chris Bishop on the phone. We were talking about him before, Wellington Cafe owner Steve Jensen and his family who were forced to leave the country 2 weeks ago after their application for residency failed. Chris, are you there?
I am. Hi, John. How are you?
Yeah, good. Look, thanks for making yourself available. Thank you for calling in. Did you give the Jensens bad advice? Did you say, look, I'm going to take your case to Scott Simpson, the Associate Minister, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it?
Look, no one's more disappointed that the Jensens residence wasn't approved than I am, and I've fought very hard for them.
Should it have been approved?
Well, I believe it should have, but I'm not the decision maker. I'm an advocate for the Jensens, and I've been helping them and assisting them for some months. What I said to the Jensens was that when the initial application was declined by immigration, was that there were basically 3 options. One was to go for an extension of their visas. So they had the option to go for a 3-year extension. They make an application for a 3-year extension to give them more time to fulfil the requirements for residence. I said that if they decided not to do that they could obviously appeal, and that's all laid out in the letter they received from immigration. They could appeal to the Immigration Protection Tribunal. And the final resort, the third option, which is the one that we went for in the end, was to make an appeal to the minister to intervene.
Absolutely. They said that your advice was that they didn't need to appeal, that actually the appeal to them, so they didn't need to appeal to the Immigration and Protection Tribunal, that was your advice, that actually Scott Simpson alone would do the trick. Did you give them a bum steer, Chris?
No. I made, look, I think that's an unfair characterisation. I don't want to get into a he said, she said with Steve, who I like and respect very much, and has made a great contribution to Lower Hutt. And I haven't, just so you also know, I haven't heard the interview with Steve that I understand you ran before. I've been collecting for Women's Refuge all afternoon, so I haven't heard it. But I think that's unfair. What I said was the appeal to the minister is the last resort option. You're essentially asking the minister to override the decision of officials, and that's a big thing for a minister to do. And I said, if you do decide to go down that path, I will mount the best case I possibly can.
Right, okay. Now, look, I'm so sorry because we're 20 seconds before 6, and you know the pips on national radio are like the guillotine. But is it over for the Jensens? You have 15 seconds to answer that question, or can they get back into New Zealand?
Well, the appeal to the Minister is over, but they also have the ability to apply for an extension of their existing visas. Their visas don't expire till November.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. An Auckland man, Gustav Otto Sampt, has been found guilty of the manslaughter of his 2-year-old daughter, Amakura Daniel Sampt, last year. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury asked the judge to help them with the issue of what is considered gross negligence. They also wanted to know whether Mr. Sampt's knowledge of faults in the gun would change his degree of negligence. Within the past hour, the jury returned a verdict of guilty of manslaughter. Northland Police have found what they think is a firearm next to the suspected remains of the man who shot 2 women dead in Whangarei on Wednesday. Forensic staff are combing through what's left of the property in Mount Tiger Road, rented by the shooter Quinn Patterson. The house burned to the ground on Wednesday after an exchange of gunfire between Patterson and the police, but it's not known how he died. The police say Patterson had a number of firearms and no licence. Superintendent Russell LaPrue says how he came to possess those weapons is a concern and an important part of the investigation. People evacuated from 2 homes in Wellington after landslips last night look like staying out all weekend. One home was evacuated after it was left hanging over the edge of a landslip above Evans Bay Parade. People had to get out of another house because of a landslip on Devon Street in the Aro Valley. The Wellington City Council says engineering reports on the properties will not be ready till next week, so the occupants will have to live elsewhere. An Aro Valley resident, Christopher Ramos Flores, says he was not evacuated, but he feels nervous all the same.
It's kind of scary to be here after you see that, because as you can see here, my house has a slope. I feel like all of the houses around here are in similar conditions. With the weather and maybe an earthquake, it makes you wonder if it's a good idea to be living here.
Christopher Ramos Flores, a student from Mexico. Wellington has had over 460 slips this winter. The police say a woman who died in West Auckland last night may have been smoking synthetic cannabis. They say there may have been other contributing factors to the death of the 31-year-old woman in Kelston. 8 deaths are already being linked to the drug in Auckland in just over a month. The Health Minister says there are enough intensive care beds for patients in the South Island, despite complaints about Dunedin Hospital. Earlier this week, RNZ News reported patient care had been delayed due to the lack of beds, and one family said their father died after his appointment was delayed 4 times. Jonathan Coleman says Dunedin Hospital has a plan to use its high dependency unit beds to supplement the intensive care unit.
If there's more people in ICU or more demand than numbers of beds, they will be able to step up to use some of those HDU beds. The other thing is, look, around New Zealand we have a pool of ICU beds, and it is common practice for people to be moved from DHB to DHB.
Jonathan Coleman says intensive care beds are available in Canterbury. The United States Republicans' Obamacare repeal bill has died in the Senate, delivering a political blow to Donald Trump and the Republican Party. The bill would have repealed a penalty on individuals who did not purchase health insurance. It would have also repealed a penalty on employers with more than 50 employees that did not provide health insurance, as well as a 2.3% excise tax on medical device sales. Senior Democrat Senator Elizabeth Warren was one of those who warned that the bill was poor legislation.
The skinny bill going to probably do 3 things. The first is rip health insurance away from millions of people. The second is drive up costs for millions more. And the third probably is blow up the health insurance markets.
United States Senator Elizabeth Warren. A charitable organisation has revealed a proposal to buy about 20 Housing New Zealand properties in New Plymouth and build more than 50 new affordable homes in their place. The Bishop's Action Foundation wants to redevelop 2 hectares of the Marfell suburb, where dozens of state homes have been demolished and others left to rot. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin has more.
The foundation's CEO, Simon Cayley, says the new homes would cost about $320,000 and be aimed at people with household incomes of between $70,000 and $90,000. Mr Cayley says rent-to-buy options could be added to the proposal for people on lower incomes. Community Housing Action Taranaki says it welcomes the plan but believes it should include some social housing because $320,000 is still beyond many people. The Foundation and Housing New Zealand are due to nail down a deal in early August. Ko Robin Martin Tēnei.
It's 6:05. To sport, the New Zealand Warriors 2017 NRL season is on the line tonight when they face defending premiers the Cronulla Sharks at Mount Smart Stadium. The Warriors are 6 points outside the top 8 with just 6 rounds remaining. Warriors captain Roger Tuivasa-Sheck says the side isn't pushing the panic button yet, but know what's at stake against the Sharks.
If we can continue to have our middles play their physical game up front and a few of us fix our execution plays, and I think that's where we lost in the last game, and against Sharks, if we could fix that up, we could come over the points.
Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. Kick-offs at 8 o'clock. Silver fern shooter Maria Tutayer says she needs to take a break from netball if she's to make it to next year's Commonwealth Games and the World Cup in 2019. Tutayer has re-signed with the Northern Mystics in Netball New Zealand for another 2 years and has a sabbatical written into her contract so she can prepare herself for the busy international schedule.
It enables me to have a break or be rested if required for next year in 2018. So I'm a lot older and your body takes a lot longer to recover. So with these next 2 pinnacle events, if I'm lucky enough to represent New Zealand and get the opportunity, then I guess in terms of me to put myself in the best position is to have a bit of leeway during next season.
Silver Ferns shooter Maria Tutayer. And Supercars leader New Zealand's Scott McLaughlin has posted the fastest practice time for this weekend's Ipswich Super Sprint. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, director, most recently of I, Daniel Blake, Ken Loach, on his half-century of uncompromising movies. Purna Bell, who lost her husband to depression and drug addiction. Violinist Andrew Beer on Bach. And Emily Perkins on remaking the Ibsen classic, A Doll's House. Join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Taumaranui and Taupō, including Bay of Plenty. Scattered showers, a few with hail easing this evening, becoming fine tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, showers possibly heavy about the Wairoa district, easing tomorrow. Snow lowering to 400 metres this evening. Taranaki and Taihape to Wellington, also Wairarapa. Showers with snow lowering to 300 metres in the south for a time, becoming isolated tomorrow. Nelson Buller, Westland and Fiordland, fine apart from a few showers in Fiordland tomorrow. Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine, but showers north of Ashburton, falling as snow to around 300 metres, gradually easing and clearing tomorrow. Southland, fine spells and isolated showers, clearing tomorrow morning. And the Chatham Islands, rain, possibly thundery, easing to showers tomorrow afternoon. Southerly gales developing from this afternoon. They're probably already there. It's 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Lots ahead, lots of breaking news. Just very quickly, in 15 seconds or less, although I'm not very good with sticking to 15 seconds, what's being called a skinny repeal, which is an attempt to throw out Obamacare without any kind of replacement, effectively, has just failed in the Senate. 51 votes to 49. 3 Republicans, including John McCain, crossed the floor. Just failed in the Senate. Did you have that in the news, yes, Katrina? Oh, OK. Well, it's hardly breaking news and I unreservedly apologise. Let's go to our reporter, Rowan Quinn. An Auckland man who shot his 2-year-old daughter in the head with a sawn-off shotgun has been found guilty of manslaughter. Gustav Otto Svant has been on trial at the High Court in Auckland over the death of his daughter Amakura at their home in Mangere on the beginning of June last year. The jury returned with a verdict about half an hour ago. Reporter Rowan Quinn is at the court and joins us now. Hi, Rowan. The facts were not in dispute. In other words, the gun was fired and the child died. But the jury took about 4 hours to deliver a verdict because they had to consider, I guess, the circumstances, right?
That's right, John. What they were deciding is how negligent Stamps was when he shot his daughter. So there was no dispute that he shot his daughter. That led to her death. They had to decide, was he grossly negligent? And the Crown argued he was. He had a sawn-off shotgun in the house. He pointed it at his daughter and pulled the trigger. The defence said the gun was dodgy, it was faulty, and that it had just kind of gone off by itself, that there was no action from Mr Stamp that had allowed that to happen. But clearly the jury has agreed with the Crown on that one.
So, guilty of manslaughter. What was the reaction from Gustav Sant himself?
It was a very muted reaction from him as the verdict was read. He has been quite upset at times during the trial. He had about 40 or 50 family, friends and supporters here, and as he left the dock to go back into custody, he turned and sort of acknowledged them, and they shouted out, "I love you," to him. They had begun to cry as the verdict was read out. They had a very muted response as well. But a lot of them were crying, and then as they left the courtroom, they were hugging each other. There was more tears and crying. A lot of children there as well, and they were very upset. Outside of the court, there were some of the young men in the group were reacting a little bit more angrily and shouting. We also heard a formal statement from the family, from the grand uncle, Tipene Daniels, who read a statement that he said was on behalf of Amokura Daniel Sampt, who is the 2-year-old victim in this case. He talked about the traumatic time for the entire whānau that this event had caused. He said it was a very complex case, and that the family would now have some sort of closure and be able to try to carry on with life. And in doing that, they wanted to remember Amokura as a vivacious, lively gift for them.
Ron Quinn live from the court, where not very long ago Gustav Otto Svant was found guilty of the manslaughter of his 2-year-old daughter, Amokura. It's 11 minutes past 6. Residents of homes in Wellington's Aroa Valley are questioning whether it's safe to stay after a major slip triggered road closures and evacuations. The Wellington Council says there have been 460 slips in the city so far this year, of which 300 have been repaired. But after rain overnight, some residents had just moments to grab essentials before fleeing homes left teetering on the edge in the suburbs of Te Aro and Evans Bay. Along the waterfront there, of course, the residents of 2 homes in those suburbs will be unable to return to their homes until council engineering reports completed next week. Christopher Ramos Flores is a PhD student and lives on Devon Street. He told our reporter Jacob McSweeney he's not sure people should be living in some of those houses at all.
Suddenly last night I went out, and when I came back, it was all completely down, and it's kind of scary to be here after you see that, because as you can see here, my house has a slope, and I feel like all of the houses around here are in similar conditions. So, you know, with the weather and, you know, the fear of maybe an earthquake or something, and raining all the time, it makes you wonder if it's a good idea to be living here or if, you know, if somebody should come and do something to make sure that something like this is not going to happen again. I would like to see maybe some kind of walls trying to contain any kind of slip or something around. I think that would make all of the neighbors feel more safe.
So in the days, like in the last week, that you have seen little pieces coming down?
Yeah. Actually, there was a somewhat big slip, maybe, I don't know, maybe around Monday, and then days after that, you could just see a little bit more coming off, and it was until last night when, you know, a big amount of soil came down.
Because people are listening, can you describe your house and the entryway?
Oh yeah. So this house is a 3-story house, and on the top level, the house is connected to the street with a tiny bridge. So we actually don't have another way to go up here except for the fire escape. So yeah, if the slip had happened this way into the bridge, we wouldn't have the bridge, and we wouldn't be able to access our home.
You would have to leave because you would only have one exit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what are you thinking, oh, maybe I have to look for a new flat, or what, do you need to talk to do you own the house, or do you
No, I'm renting, but I'm definitely thinking about moving for various reasons. One is you know, the Aroa Valley is quite cold, and here, because of this hill, we don't get much sun, so lately it's been kind of hard with the weather, and now with this thing happening here, and I actually have the feeling that the house is getting sloppier lately. I don't know if it's actually...
It's starting to slope?
I feel like the other day I was walking and I just had the sensation that I think it's more pronounced now.
Christopher Ramos Flores, who was a PhD student who was talking to our reporter Jacob McSweeney. The police believe they found a firearm next to what they believe are the remains of Quinn Patterson, who killed a mother and daughter in Whangarei. Quinn Patterson killed Wendy and Nathania Campbell and wounded a man who was with them when they went to his rented home on Mount Tiger Road to do maintenance on Wednesday. The police have now confirmed that Patterson, who had been jailed as revealed on Checkpoint last night for a violent attack on a policeman in 1983, possessed a number of firearms but did not hold a firearms licence. Real estate expert David Faulkner, whose company trains property managers, says the tragedy highlights how risky that job can sometimes be. He says those risks may be growing as low-income people and those on the margins come under increasing financial pressure in their homes.
Sometimes the property manager's just seen as the scapegoat, and the tenant could have all types of issues going in their life. They'll look for a scapegoat. Along comes the property manager. In this case, you know, they've just become a victim of a horrendous crime.
Are there any background checks that you know of that would have shown up that this person, Quinn Patterson, did jail time for repeatedly stabbing a police officer back when he was a young man and nearly killing him?
Yeah. Well, there are companies out there, and your property management companies will be using certain companies which will do the background checks. So you'll load in the tenant's details. It will come up with things like tenant history, whether they've got bad debts, in some cases police checks. I'm not 100% that something of a crime which happened so long ago would have shown up. It actually happened to me as a property manager, where we've done background checks on somebody who was a convicted murderer, and nothing came up. They rented out this property, and it was only when word got round we realised what had happened. And we'd done our thorough background checks. This is going back, you know, a few years ago now. So I wouldn't say things would guarantee showed up in all circumstances.
So do you need better access to police records? Do you need the police to actually help you out with a thorough background check of police records?
You know, anything that helps identify, you know, the background of an individual will always help. But
what sort of access do you have, though, to police records? If you go to the police and say, "Is this guy a murderer?" What are they going to tell you that?
Well, in the case which happened with our company, it didn't. You know, and we use background checks. So there are companies now which can access criminal records. So I'm not 100% if I would say what the actual crime was, but then that may be up to the property managers to do a bit more due diligence and find out, you know, a bit more about the individual. What I can say as well is that in certain areas of New Zealand where it is lower income, you're never always going to get, you know, there's got to be history of tenants, whether it's bad credit or whatever. It depends on the location. And I've seen it myself in lower income areas, or where there's areas where properties are quite remote. Try to get that perfect tenant. You're not always going to get them. So you may just go with your gut feeling after you're doing your background checks, with consultation with the landlord, and pick the best out of what may be a bad bunch of tenant applications.
David Faulkner talking to Lois Williams. Let's head back to Washington now, and what really does look like open warfare that appears to have broken out between Donald Trump's new communications chief and senior members of the White House staff. In a startling move, Anthony Scaramucci, the new White House communications boss, called into CNN's New Day show for a 30-minute interview to complain about White House leaks and the possibility of bringing the FBI in to find the leakers. After accusing the White House chief of staff, Reince Priebus, of leaking his financial disclosure form, the Mooch compared his relationship with Mr. Priebus as similar to Cain and Abel. He went on to moan about the leaks and slam reporters, including CNN's Jake Tapper. Here are some of the highlights.
The president brought me in. He knows I'm his friend first, Chris. You're from New York. I'm from New York. The president is from New York.
This White House leaks more than any I have ever been in contact with, and I think that they're
ridiculous.
And I don't know if I'd use the word ridiculous, because I think
let me put it this
that
way.
a lot of the leaks.
How's this, Chris? Unprofessional. You became a verbal proofreader overnight.
Politically,
okay. Well,
I get why you want a police message within your house. In your house, I get it.
I told the president this morning, when the iceberg hits the boat, the rats start flying up from steerage, right? Because the water comes in steerage. Okay. So when you mention the FBI and the Department of Justice, you watch how the rats lift in the boat.
Yeah, I understand, but you know what the problem is that you're putting the boat gets put into the iceberg. The iceberg does not hit the boat. And my point of the analogy correction
okay, that's
is...
really cute. You're doing a good job this morning.
If you bring in the FBI...
That's a really cute way. It's a really cute way to spin my metaphor, but you get the point that I'm making. I told Tapper I'll send him a box of Kleenex.
Yeah, I don't know why you said that, by the way.
I'll send him a
Jake
box of
Tapper
Kleenex
is one of the most straight down the middle guys. It's insulting when you say that. It's insulting when you say that.
Removed. What's that?
It's insulting when you say something like that to Jake Tapper, by the way.
All right, I'm teasing him.
But that's not a nice thing to tease a journalist about.
You're allowed to hit me.
It's like teasing us about being Italian. It's not nice. It's offensive. When you say to a journalist, I'll bring you Kleenex because you'll be upset if the president gets reelected, you're suggesting that they're biased. It's not nice.
Send me toilet paper if he loses. How's that? I'll send you Kleenex. I'm making a joke. What I love about you guys, you hit me 3 times hard. I say something teasing, you guys get upset.
You think this is hard? Okay. I'm giving you pats on the head like you were a puppy. These are just regular questions.
That's CNN's Chris Cuomo talking to the new White House communications head, Anthony Scaramucci. Extraordinary phone call he made to the New Yorker, and you can read the details of that online. Detainees in the Manus Island Detention Centre are warning that attempts by Papua New Guinea immigration authorities to make the move will lead to violence. Immigration officials and police have told the 100 men who remain inside one of the centre's main accommodation compounds that they must go to a transit centre near the main town on the island. Power and water are expected to be cut off at the compound today, and the men who remain on the site could be arrested. The ABC's PNG correspondent, Eric Torchik, has more.
Immigration authorities refer to the refugees in the Manus Island Detention Centre as residents. If that term is accurate, then they're being kicked out of home.
Day by day, the ABF, Australian immigration, they are trying to put more pressure on us to force us to leave RPC1. So it's a place gonna be a big mess, and we have no choice.
Iranian refugee Fawad Azad is one of the residents of the Foxtrot accommodation compound, which immigration authorities are trying to close as they attempt to meet the October deadline to shut down the detention facility.
I am in Fox. I don't have any option. I have no place to go.
The 100 men left in Foxtrot have been told they can move to the nearby Oscar and Delta compounds on a temporary basis. Iranian asylum seeker Farhad Rahimi says those compounds don't have much room left.
The camps are already overcrowded, and we cannot move anywhere. We don't have any place to go and live.
The refugees and asylum seekers are being told to move to a so-called transit centre near the island's main town. The transit centre can accommodate less than 300 people, but there are more than 700 refugees on Manus, an indication the government expects hundreds to be resettled in either the US or elsewhere in Papua New Guinea before the detention centre closes. Despite threats to cut the power and water to Foxtrot compound, Iranian refugee Baruz Buchani says most of the men are refusing to move.
So what will happen? I really worry that on coming weeks or coming days, some violence will happen.
For the last 2 days, Papua New Guinea police have entered the compound, telling Foxtrot residents to move. Baruz Buchani says most of the men aren't listening.
I think it is a clear message, and the government should know that these people in Manus, most of them don't want to leave the center, and there is no way. They have to use force if they want to take people out and put them in the community and resettle people in PNG.
Iranian refugee Baruz Buchani ending that report from Eric Torchik for the ABC. It's 6:23. Infrastructure, especially in our largest city, Auckland, is shaping up to be an election issue. Housing, roads, power, but an often forgotten one is water supply and wastewater removal. The average Auckland household produces 675 litres of wastewater every day. Watercare in Auckland is spending around $500 million a year on new projects at the moment, and some of them are quite novel. On the North Shore, it's building a massive underground tank to hold excess wastewater. Zach Fleming was given exclusive access with our cameraman Bradley White.
It's essentially a giant underground sewerage tank, which is ironically being built in an old landfill in Takapuna. But it will have a big impact because
it reduces the amount of overflows,
which means
it can make the waterways cleaner.
Soon there will be, fingers crossed at least, no more wastewater runoffs at beaches around the southern end of the North Shore. Takapuna, Devonport, Northcote. Everything about it's big. The price tag, $30 million. The time frame, a year and a half to build. The size.
The entire tank's been built underground, more than 10 metres underground, but it's still huge, bigger than an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Despite that though, when it's finished, driving past you will have absolutely no idea it's here.
Watercare's project engineer Ken Lucas says the tank replaces a smaller one that was built nearby in the 60s.
It's probably sixfold greater. So you've got 520,000 litres in the old one. This is 3.5 million.
So we've got 3.5 million litres of essentially poo, shower.
Absolutely, yes, we have, yeah. There's roughly about 3,100 cubic metres of concrete that's gone into this. Within the structure, there's probably about 540 tonnes of steel.
So when there's more wastewater than the system can cope with, the extra will divert to the tank. And the tank will then be drained back into the system once everything goes back to normal. The pumps can drain it in just 2 hours. But it's only built with 50 years resiliency. I asked Watercare's GM of Infrastructure, Steve Webster, if that's enough.
You can always spend more up front, but that's fundamentally that's not a cost-effective way of delivering infrastructure for a city like Auckland. We wouldn't be able to afford it.
But if you had more money, you would like to potentially build, 100 years out, 150 years out?
No, we wouldn't. No, because that wouldn't be the right solution for the city. For an asset management sense, that's not the correct solution for the city. You need to build when you require it, as opposed to building everything at once.
Watercare's set aside nearly $5 billion over the next decade for new infrastructure. Mr Webster says it's determined not to be the bottleneck that stops Auckland growing.
We're building one in Glen Eden now. We Marama. We built one just recently. We have some other large water storage tanks that we're building right now as well.
But for things like this tank, where technically it's not essential, could better planning mean we'd have started building these earlier, and would our beaches therefore be cleaner?
As the city grows, as the city, the density increases in the city, that brings with it issues and problems that we have to resolve. So no, doing this 15 years ago wouldn't have made any difference. So we're at a point now that we need to build it to reduce the wet weather overflows.
He says there are around 150 projects currently being built across Auckland. Once the tank's complete, it'll be monitored and controlled remotely from Watercare's head office 10 kilometres away in Remuera. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
It's 6:27 on Friday night. Finally tonight, and therefore for the week, it's a job he reportedly does not want to leave. But Prince William has been working out his last day as an air ambulance pilot, a role he's carried out for the last 2 years. He's now set to take up his royal duties full-time. The BBC's Nicholas Wichtel reports.
The 4 pilots has taken another step.
A team photograph at the start of his final shift. A picture from his working life which is likely to mean more than most for William Wales, since it will remind him of the role he's played as a member of the emergency services, doing a job largely out of public sight, in which he's been able to prove himself solely on the basis of ability. His colleagues say they'll miss him.
He's a hard-working member of the team, always keen to get his hands dirty and help out. Whether it is just cleaning the aircraft or actually at scene helping out with patients that are critically ill.
From the moment William took up his air ambulance duties more than 2 years ago, it's clear how much the job has meant to him. It's kept him grounded, he's said, working as a member of a highly committed team.
When I put my air ambulance hat on and I come here and I fly, I'm one of the team. I want to get the job done, and at the end of the day feel like I've made a difference and a contribution.
He's flown on scores of emergency call-outs and seen tragedy at close quarters.
There are some very sad, dark moments, and we talk about it a lot. But it's hard. You try not to take it away from you, but it can be quite difficult.
But for all the difficult moments, William says he's hugely grateful for the experience. He says it's instilled in him a profound respect for the men and women who serve in our emergency services, which I hope to continue to champion even as I leave the profession. After tonight's shift, William will turn to the profession to which he was born and from which he's known there could be no escape. That's to be a full-time working member of the British royal family, supporting his grandmother and preparing for the day when he will be king, but sustained by the knowledge that once he did have the freedom to do a valued job of his own choice.
Nicholas Wichtel, who has, I believe, the completely unenviable job of being a Royals reporter for the BBC. My giddy aunt, what a job that would be. That ends Checkpoint for this week. Thank you so much for being with us. We hope you have a really fantastic weekend, and we hope to see you again and speak to you again at 5 o'clock on Monday night. Until then, from our fantastic team, a very good evening indeed.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. An Auckland man, Gustav Otto Samft, has been found guilty of the manslaughter of his 2-year-old daughter last year. Northland police have found what they think is a firearm next to the suspected remains of the man who shot 2 women dead in Whangarei on Wednesday. The police say a woman who died in West Auckland last night may have been smoking synthetic cannabis. And the United States Republicans' Obamacare repeal bill has died in the Senate, delivering a political blow to Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Country Life's jumping in a plane this week to head offshore for the harvest of New Zealand's earliest avocado crop.
It'll take us approximately 6 to 7 minutes. Off to Motiti we go.
The Mortiti orchard is one of the largest in New Zealand and is possibly one of the most expensive to run.
I mean, you wouldn't want to be an ordinary, everyday avocado grower here on the island if you weren't chasing the premium that comes out of the early